Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly. I'm Pemberton. This is part 38. Xerxes, gazing at his endless army, asks the banished Spartan king Demaratus whether the Greeks would be mad enough to stand against it, and Demaratus answers with the most famous sentence in the book that the Spartans are free, but not wholly free, for over them stands a master, law, which they fear far more than Xerxes' men fear him, and at its command they will stand and die. Xerxes only laughs. Then the great march rolls on through Thrace and Macedonia, rivers drunk dry by the host, lions falling upon the baggage camels in the night, and down at last into Thessaly, to the edge of Greece proper. Let us continue.
After Xerxes had sailed past these ships and had disembarked, he sent for Demaratus, son of Ariston, who was marching with him against Hellas. When Demaratus came, Xerxes questioned him in this way. Demaratus, now, I wish to ask you something that I want to know. You are a Hellene, and as I am told both by you and by the other Hellenes who speak with me, you come from a city that is neither the smallest nor the weakest in Hellas. So tell me this, will the Hellenes endure raising their hands against me? For in my judgment, even if all the Hellenes and the remaining nations who live toward the west were gathered together, they would not be strong enough in battle to withstand my attack, supposing they were my enemies. Still, I want to know your opinion too. What do you say about these matters? Xerxes asked this, and Demaratus answered him by asking whether he should speak the truth or say what would please the king. Xerxes told him to speak the truth, saying that because of it he would suffer nothing unpleasant, any more than he had suffered before. When Demaratus heard this, he spoke as follows. O king, since you command me in every way to speak the truth, and to speak so that afterward you will not convict me of having spoken falsely, I say this: poverty has always been native to Hellas, while courage has been brought in, acquired through intelligence and the force of law. Hellas uses this courage always to keep away from herself, not only poverty, but also slavery to a master. Now I praise all the Hellenes who are settled in those Dorian lands, but what I am about to say concerns not all of them, but only the Lacedaemonians. About them I say first, that it is impossible they will ever accept your terms, which brings slavery for Hellas, and next, that they will stand against you in battle even if all the other Hellenes are on your side. As for their number, do not ask how many they must be to do this. If it happens that 1,000 of them have come out into the field, they will fight you, and if there are fewer than this, they will fight, and if there are more, they will fight. Demaratus, what a speech you have made, saying that 1,000 men will fight with this vast army. Come, tell me this, you say that you yourself are king of these men. Will you agree at once to fight 10 men? And yet, if your state is in every way such as you describe it, you, as their king, ought by your laws to stand against twice as many as any other man. That is to say, if each of them is a match for 10 men of my army, then I expect you to be a match for 20. In that way the report you give would be confirmed. But if you and those who boast so greatly are such men, and only as large in body as the Hellenes who commonly come to speak with me, yourself included, then beware that what has been said proves to be nothing but empty boasting. Come, let me examine the matter by what is probable. How could 1,000 men, or 10,000, or even 50,000, especially if they were all equally free and were not ruled by one man, stand against so great an army? Or, as you know, if they were 5,000 in number, there would be more than 1,000 of us for each one of them. If indeed they were ruled by one man after our fashion, perhaps fear of him would make them braver than their nature, or they might be driven by the lash to fight against greater numbers, though they themselves were fewer. But if they are left at liberty, they will do neither of these things. For my part, I think that even if the Hellenes were equal in number, they would scarcely dare to fight with the Persians alone. Among us, however, what you speak of is found in individual men, not often, but rarely, for there are Persians among my spearmen who would agree to fight 3 Hellenes at once. But you have no experience of these things, and therefore you speak very much at random. O king, from the beginning I knew that if I spoke the truth, I would not say what was pleasing to you. But since you compelled me to speak the exact truth, I told you the things that concern the Spartans. And yet you know better than anyone how I am now attached to them by affection. First they took from me the rank and privileges that came to me from my fathers, and then they made me a man without a native land and an exile. But your father received me and gave me a livelihood and a house to live in. Surely it is not likely that a prudent man will thrust aside friendship offered to him. Rather, he will accept it with full contentment. I do not claim that I am able to fight 10 men, or even 2. Indeed, if I had my will, I would not fight even 1. But if there were necessity, or if the cause urging me to fight were a great one, I would most willingly fight one of these men who says he is a match for 3 Hellenes. So too the Lacedaemonians, when fighting one by one, are inferior to no men, and when fighting together, they are the best of all men. Though they are free, they are not free in all things, for law is set over them as a master, and they fear it much more than your people fear you. At least, it is certain that they do whatever that master commands, and it always commands the same thing. It bids them not flee from battle before any multitude of men, but to remain in their post and either win the victory or lose their life. But if, when I say these things, I seem to you to be speaking at random, then in the future I prefer to be silent about other matters. At this time I spoke only because I was compelled. Yet may it happen according to your mind, O king. Demaratus answered in this way, and Xerxes turned the matter into laughter. He felt no anger, but dismissed him kindly. After conversing with him, Xerxes appointed Macaulay, son of Megadostes, to be governor at Dariscos, removing the governor whom Darius had appointed there. Then he marched his army through Thrace to invade Hellas. This Macaulay, whom Xerxes left behind there, proved to be a man of such quality that Xerxes used to send gifts to him alone, considering him the best of all the men whom either he himself or Darius had appointed as governors. Xerxes sent him gifts every year, and so did Artaxerxes, son of Xerxes, to the descendants of Macaulay. For even before this march, governors had been appointed in Thrace and everywhere around the Hellespont. After this expedition, all of these governors, both those in Thrace and those in the Hellespont, were conquered by the Hellenes, except only the one at Dariscos. No one was ever able to conquer Macaulay at Dariscos, though many tried. For this reason, gifts continued to be sent in his honor from the king who reigns over the Persians. Of those who were conquered by the Hellenes, however, Xerxes considered no one a good man except Boges, who was at Ion. Xerxes never ceased praising him, and he honored very highly the children of Boges who survived him in the land of Persia. In truth, Boges proved himself worthy of great praise. When he was besieged by the Athenians under Cimon, son of Miltiades, he could have gone out under a truce and returned home to Asia, but he chose not to do this, fearing that the king might think he had survived through cowardice. He continued to hold out until the end. Then, when there was no longer any supply of provisions inside the wall, he heaped up a great pyre, cut the throats of his children, his wife, his concubines, and his servants, and threw them into the fire. After this, he scattered all the gold and silver in the city from the wall into the river Strymon, and when he had done this, he threw himself into the fire. Thus he is justly praised by the Persians even down to the present time. From Dariscos, Xerxes proceeded onward to invade Hellas, and as he went he compelled the peoples who came in his path one after another to join his march. The whole country as far as Thessaly had already been reduced to subjection, as I have explained before, and was tributary to the king, having been subdued first by Megabazus and afterward by Mardonios. In his march from Dariscos he first passed by the Samothracian strongholds, of which the one situated farthest toward the west is a city called Mesembria. Next after this comes Stryme, a city of the Thasians, and between them flows the river Lizos. At this time the river did not have enough water to supply the army of Xerxes, but failed. This country was in old times called Galaic, but is now called Bryantique. By strict justice, however, this also belongs to the Ciconians. After crossing the bed of the river Lizos, which had been dried up, Xerxes passed by these Hellenic cities, Moronia, Dicia, and Abdera. He passed by these, and also by the following notable lakes lying near them: the Ismarian lake, between Moronia and Stryme; the Bistonian lake near Dicia, into which two rivers pour their waters, the Tros and the Compsantos, and at Abdera Xerxes passed no lake of note, but he did pass the river Nestos, which flows there into the sea. After passing these places, he went by the cities of the mainland. Near one of them there happens to be a lake about 30 furlongs in circumference, full of fish and very brackish. This lake the baggage animals alone drank dry when they were watered at it. The name of this city is Pisteros. These Hellenic cities lying along the sea coast he passed by, leaving them on his left. The Thracian tribes through whose country he marched were the Patians, Ciconians, Bistonians, Sapians, Dirceans, Edonians, and Satrians. Those of these who were settled along the sea coast accompanied him with their ships. Those who lived inland, and have been named by me, were compelled to accompany him on land, except the Satrians. The Satrians, so far as we know, have never yet become obedient to any man, but remain free down to my time, alone of all the Thracians. They live in high mountains covered with every kind of forest and with snow, and they are very skilled in war. They are the people who possess the oracle of Dionysos, which is on their highest mountains. Among the Satrians, the Bessians act as prophets of the temple. A prophetess gives the oracles, as at Delphi, and beyond this there is nothing further of a remarkable kind. After Xerxes had passed through the land just described, he next passed the strongholds of the Pyrians, one named Phagres and the other Pergamos. By this route he made his march, going close by their walls, keeping Mount Pengaen on his right. This mountain is great and lofty, and in it there are mines of both gold and silver, possessed by the Pyrians and Odomantians, and especially by the Satrians. Thus, passing by the Paeonians, Tiberians, and Paeoplians, who lived beyond Pengaen toward the north wind, he went on westward until at last he came to the river Strymon and the city of Ion. Boges, the same man about whom I spoke a little earlier, was commander of Ion as long as he lived. The country around Mount Pengaen is called Philis. Westward it extends to the river Angates, which flows into the Strymon, and southward it stretches to the Strymon itself. At this river the Magians sacrificed for good omens by slaughtering white horses. After doing this and many other things besides as charms for the river, they went on at the 9 ways in the land of the Edonians by the bridges, for they found the Strymon already yoked with bridges. When they were informed that this place was called the 9 ways, they buried alive there that same number of boys and maidens, children of the natives of the place. Burying alive is a Persian custom, for I am informed that Amstress, wife of Xerxes, when she had grown old, also made payment for her own life to the god said to be beneath the earth by burying twice 7 children of Persians who were men of renown. As the army marched on from the Strymon, it next found a sea beach stretching toward the setting sun, and passed by the Hellenic city of Argilos, which stood there. This region, and the country above it, is called by Zalcia. From there, keeping on the left the gulf that lies off Poseidon, Xerxes went through the plain called the plain of Silius, passing by Segeros, a Hellenic city, and so came to Acanthos. As he went, he took with him each of these tribes, and also those who lived about Mount Pangaeon, just as he had done with the peoples I listed before. Those who lived along the sea coast were made to serve in the ships, and those who lived inland were made to accompany him on foot. The Thracians do not disturb the road by which King Xerxes marched his army, nor do they sow crops over it, but they pay it very great reverence down to my own time. When Xerxes came to Acanthos, he proclaimed a guess, friendship with the people of Acanthos. He also presented them with the Median dress and praised them, because he saw that they were zealous in serving him in the war, and had heard about the channel that had been dug. While Xerxes was in Acanthos, it happened that the man set over the making of the channel, named Artachaeus, died of sickness. He was highly honored by Xerxes and belonged to the Achaemenid family. In stature, he was the tallest of all the Persians, falling short by only 4 fingers of 5 royal cubits in height, and he had the loudest voice of all men. Xerxes was therefore greatly grieved at losing him. He carried him out and buried him with great honor, and the whole army joined in raising a mound over him. The Acanthians, by command of an oracle, sacrificed to this Artachaeus as a hero, calling on his name in worship. King Xerxes, as I have said, was greatly grieved at the loss of Artachaeus. Meanwhile, the Hellenes who were entertaining his army and providing dinners for Xerxes were brought to utter ruin, so that they were being driven from house and home. For example, when the Thasians entertained the army of Xerxes and provided him with a dinner on behalf of their towns on the mainland, Antipater, son of Orgias, who had been appointed for this purpose and was a man of reputation among the citizens equal to the best, reported that 400 talents of silver had been spent on the dinner. In the other cities, too, those appointed to the task reported accounts just like this or nearly so. The dinner was given in the following way, having been ordered a long time beforehand, and being regarded by them as a matter of great importance. First, as soon as they heard of it from the heralds who carried the proclamation around, the citizens in the various cities distributed grain among their households, and all of them continued for many months to make wheat and barley meal. Then they fed cattle, seeking out and obtaining the finest animals for a high price. They also kept birds, both land birds and water birds, in cages or in ponds, all for the entertainment of the army. Then again they had drinking cups and mixing bowls made of gold and silver, and all the other things that are placed on a table. These were made for the king himself and for those who ate at his table. For the rest of the army, only the appointed food was provided. Whenever the army came to any place, a tent was already pitched in which Xerxes himself stayed, while the rest of the army remained in the open air. When the time for dinner came, the hosts had hard labor, but the others, after being filled with food and spending the night there, tore up the tent the next day, took all the movable furniture with them, and continued their march, leaving nothing behind but carrying everything away. At that time a well-spoken word was uttered by Megacrion, a man of Abdera. He advised the people of Abdera to go in a body, both themselves and their wives, to their temples and sit there as suppliants of the gods, begging them that in the future too they would ward off from them half of the evils that threatened. He also told them to feel great thankfulness to the gods for what had already happened, because King Xerxes had not thought fit to take food twice each day. If they had been ordered beforehand to prepare breakfast in the same way as dinner, it would have remained for the men of Abdera either not to wait for the coming of Xerxes, or, if they stayed, to be crushed by misfortune more than any other men on earth. So these cities, though hard-pressed, were nevertheless performing what had been appointed to them. From Acanthos, Xerxes commanded the generals to wait for the fleet at Therma, and then allowed the ships to take their own course apart from him. This Therma is the place situated on the Thermaic Gulf, from which the gulf also has its name. He did this because he was informed that this was the shortest way. From Doriscos as far as Acanthos the army had marched in this manner. Xerxes had divided the whole land army into 3 divisions. One division he assigned to go along the sea, accompanying the fleet. Mardonios and Macis were commanders of this division. Another third of the army was appointed to go by the inland route, and the generals commanding it were Tritantachus and Xerxes. Meanwhile, the 3rd division, with which Xerxes himself went, marched in the middle between the other 2, and acknowledged Smerdamenes and Megabizos as its commanders. The fleet, when Xerxes had released it, sailed straight through the channel made at Athos, which crossed to the gulf on which the cities of Assa, Pyloros, Singos, and Sartes stand. After taking up contingents from these cities also, it sailed from there with a clear course toward the Thermaic Gulf. Turning around in Pylos, the headland of Toron, it left on one side the following Hellenic cities, from which it took contingents of ships and men: Toron, Galepsos, Sirmile, Machaebrana, and Olynthos. This region is called Sithonia. The fleet of Xerxes then cut across from the headland of Ampylos to that of Canistron, which runs out farthest to sea of all Pallene. There it took contingents of ships and men from Potidaea, Aphides, Nepolis, Age, the Rambo, Scaone men, and Sane, for these are the cities that occupy the region now called Pallene, but formerly called Phlegra. Then, sailing along the coast of this country also, the fleet continued its course toward the place already mentioned, taking contingents also from the cities that come next after Pallene and border on the Thermate Gulf. Their names are these: Lipaxos, Cambria, Lysae, Chigonos, Campsa, Smila, and Aenea. The region in which these cities stand is still called Crossea to the present day. Sailing from Aenea, with whose name I ended the list of cities, the fleet came at once into the Thermate Gulf and to the region of Macedonia. So it arrived at the previously mentioned Therma, and at the cities of Sindos and Chalstra on the river Axios. This river is the boundary between the land of Macedonia and Bacchia, and the narrow region of Bacchia that lies along the seacoast is occupied by the cities of Icni and Pella. While the naval force was encamped about the river Axios, the city of Therma, and the cities lying between the two, waiting for the king to arrive, Xerxes and the land army were proceeding from Acanthos. They cut through the middle by the shortest route, aiming to reach Therma. Xerxes was going through Paeonia and Crestonia to the river Chidoros, which begins in the land of the Crestonians, runs through the region of Macedonia, and comes out beside the marsh near the river Axios. As he proceeded by this way, lions attacked the camels that carried his provisions. The lions regularly came down by night, leaving their own haunts, but they touched nothing else, neither beast of burden nor man. They killed only the camels. I wonder what the cause was, and what it was that drove the lions to abstain from everything else and attack only the camels, creatures they had never seen before and of which they had no experience. There are in these parts both many lions, and also wild oxen, the kind with very large horns, that are often brought into Hellas. The range in which these lions are found is bounded on one side by the river Nestos, which flows through Abdera, and on the other by the Aklos, which flows through Acarnania. East of the Nestos, in no part of Europe before this point would one see a lion, nor again in the remaining part of the continent west of the Aklos. They are produced only in the space between these rivers. When Xerxes reached Therma, he established the army there. His army, encamped there, occupied at least this much of the land along the sea. Beginning from the city of Therma and from Macedonia, it extended as far as the rivers Lydias and Heliacmon, which form the boundary between the lands of Bacchia and Macedonia, mingling their waters together in one and the same stream. The barbarians, then, were encamped in these regions. Of the rivers that have been listed, only the river Chidoros, flowing from the Crestonian land, was insufficient for the army's drinking and failed in its stream. Then Xerxes, seeing from Therma the mountains of Thessaly, Olympos and Ossa, and that they were very high, was informed that between them there was a narrow channel through which the Penaios flows. He also heard that by this way there was a good road leading to Thessaly. He formed a desire to sail there and look at the outlet of the Penaios, because he intended to march by the upper road, through the land of the Macedonians who dwell inland, until he came to the Parabians, passing by the city of Ganos, for he was informed that this was the safest way to go. Having formed this desire, he did as follows. He embarked in a Sidonian ship, the same one in which he always used to embark whenever he wished to do something of this kind, and he displayed a signal for the others also to put out to sea, leaving the land army where it was. When Xerxes had looked at the outlet of the Penaios, he was filled with great wonder. He summoned his guides, and asked them whether it was possible to turn the river aside, and bring it out to the sea by another way. It is said that Thessaly was in old times a lake, enclosed on all sides by very high mountains. The parts toward the east are shut in by the ranges of Pelion and Ossa, which join one another at their lower slopes. The parts toward the north wind are shut in by Olympos, those toward the west by Pindos, and those toward midday and the south wind by Othries. The region in the middle between these mountains that have been named is Thessaly, shaped like a hollow. Many rivers flow into it, and among them the five most notable are the Penaios, Epidanos, Onichonos, Enipius, and Pamizos. These rivers gather their waters from the mountains that enclose Thessaly all around, and flow into this plain, each with its own separate name, but they have their outlet to the sea by one narrow channel, first mingling all their waters together into one and the same stream. As soon as they are mingled, from that point onward the Penaios prevails in name over the rest and causes the others to lose their separate names. It is said that in ancient times, when this channel and outflow between the mountains did not yet exist, these rivers, and besides them the lake Boibes also, did not have the names they have now, but by their waters they made all Thessaly a sea. The Thessalians themselves say that Poseidon made the channel through which the Penaios flows, and they say this reasonably. For anyone who believes that Poseidon shakes the earth, and that the openings made by earthquake are the work of this god, would say, if he saw this place, that it had been made by Poseidon. The splitting apart of the mountains is the work of an earthquake, as is evident to me. When Xerxes asked whether there was any other possible outlet to the sea for the Penaios, the guides answered with exact knowledge of the truth. O king, this river has no other outlet that reaches the sea. There is only this one, for all Thessaly is encircled by mountains as if by a crown. To this Xerxes is said to have replied as follows. Then the Thessalians are prudent men. It seems this was what they wished to guard against in good time when they changed their counsel, considering especially, among other things, that they have a country which appears easy to conquer and could quickly be taken. It would only have been necessary to let the river flow over their land by making an embankment to stop it from passing through the narrow channel and so diverting the course by which it now flows, in order to put all Thessaly under water except the mountains. He said this in reference to the sons of Aluus, because they, being Thessalians, were the first of the Hellenes to give themselves over to the king. Xerxes thought that they were offering him friendship on behalf of their whole nation. After saying this and looking at the place, he sailed back to Therma. He then stayed in the region of Pieria for many days, because meanwhile a third part of his army was cutting the road over the mountains of Macedonia, so that the whole host might pass by this route into the land of the Parabians. At this time the heralds who had been sent to Hellas to demand the gift of earth returned, some empty-handed and others bringing earth and water.
And we will stop there, with Xerxes in Thessaly looking down the road into Greece, and the Greeks at last having to decide whether to fight or to kneel. Next time, in part 39, we go to the other side, the frightened Greek cities, the terrible oracles of Delphi, the wooden wall that only Themistocles could read or write, and a desperate begging tour for allies. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.